This is a continuation from the previous video. So the statement that was made was, isn't their fear justified, and is wanting to hold on to what you have so long struggled for unreasonable? This is in reference to those who have a lot of money and don't want to give up for the have-nots because they feel that this would come at their expense. Higher perspective states, first, it is not necessarily true that to give more to those who now hunger and thirst and live without shelter, others must give up their abundance. As I have pointed out, all you would have to do is take the 1 trillion a year spent annually worldwide for military purposes and shift that to humanitarian purposes. And you will have solved the problem without spending an additional penny or shifting any of the wealth from where it now resides to where it does not. Of course, it could be argued that those international conglomerates whose profits come from war and tools of war would be the losers, as would their employees, and all those whose abundance is derived from the world's conflict consciousness. But perhaps your source of abundance is misplaced. Just want to reflect on that. Your source of abundance is misplaced. So do we put it into these tools and military applications for war, which is maintaining that conflict consciousness? And I'm just adding here that also plays out through the violent video games, through the violent movies that keep reinforcing violence as entertainment. But for the people, say, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Syria, in the Balkans, if we go back to the Vietnam War, to Korea, to Second World War, and we go on the ground with the people who starved, who lost family members, and we're talking hundreds of millions of people killed, innocent people killed as a result of a conflict consciousness which we justify. You know, collateral damage is what is called of the public who get killed. This is actually on the ground murder. Nobody wants to face that, but that's what it is. Whether your intent is part of a larger strategy in order to win a war, or whether your intent is a crime of passion, or whether it's even an accident. Well, an accidental death is actually different. That doesn't have the intent of a desire to actually kill someone. But when there's an intention there, that is murder. And those are the words we don't use. We sanitize the language around it. Collateral damage, friendly fire. This is deceptive. As a soldier said to me, war is disgusting, war is terrible. For those on the ground, it's horrifying. And we have to get real about where we put money. Why should people be starving? Why should people not have clothes to wear? Why should we make retirees live in poverty? Why should healthcare be in a tiered structure of those who can afford it and those who can't? Why can't the abundance be shared equally amongst the people in order of priority, where the need is? And even if we go back to the argument that the tax base is provided by the people, surely their money should be spent as a priority on those in that community who need it as a first priority, and then from there, more and more programs to really fuel the common good on some level. So I'll continue reading. The last statement was the abundance being misplaced, so those profiting from war. It goes on to say, if one had to depend on the world living in strife in order for one to survive, perhaps this dependence explains why your world resists any attempt to create a structure for lasting peace. that part obviously impacted me, because what I'm seeing as a person who's obviously inspired by peace, and it's funny, it's only been really the last few years that I've started to write more about the military. Prior to that, I was really focused on peace education. But I've, in a sense, kind of had to go into exploring the military because I'm seeing the amount of money that's been spent. I've also had really great concerns around the violent video games with the children, because it's a form of simulation that the soldiers use to train soldiers, and then they bring it into the gaming area for children and young people. They get addicted to it, and then they're going to mightily resist giving it up, even though it's deeply embedding within them an okayness of violence. And these games are getting more and more vivid. Children can scan faces onto those who are perpetrating violence. And then as a society, we all get amazed when mass killings happen, like we've just seen in New Zealand. The Columbine incident in United States, Sandy Hook incident, the various shootings around the world where civilians are being killed by shooters. We're all amazed by that, and then we put a label on it, but we will not turn that attention back to our society and look at the levels of violence that are being permitted as normal. This sustains this conflict consciousness until we as a collective decide we actually want a world that's peaceful, or a world working in harmony with itself. That's not going to necessarily mean no conflict. We're going to still have plenty of conflict. People will always have differences with one another, but it need not be violent is what the main thrust of this discussion is about. To solve a problem, you do not need to destroy another person. Denial would have you remove that other person because you do not want to turn that around and face yourself about what you're actually doing. You want to feel good about yourself, so you have to demonize and make the other wrong. And I've seen that in many political situations where various leaders have been destroyed, their reputations destroyed. I'll give you an example. Aung San Suu Kyi. I heard her speaking in Bangkok many years ago. I think it was Hawaii, actually. It was Hawaii at a Rotary Peace Conference. She only came to that conference because she really believed that Rotary would be able to generate money to help her people. Now, what ended up happening with the situation with the Rohingya, from what I understand, and I'm not right across this issue by any means, but this is my intuition in respect of her. I knew when I saw her speaking that she was genuine. You don't go under house arrest for as many years as she did, seeking to assist her people and then engage in the destruction of people or particular ethnic groups. Unfortunately, because the regime there were pretty much given the green light by their Asian partners and obviously those other countries that have influence, those Rohingya, which were Muslim people, were run out of that country and they were brutalised as part of a sort of a global discrimination against a group. That was nothing to do with her. Even though she was blamed for it as the leader at the time, she had no power whatsoever. It was the military junta that had power. And I know this because I studied and heard actually lectures from those on the ground in northern Thailand, because I was up in northern Thailand with Rotary. And we heard from the backpacking doctors about the brutality towards the Karen at the time, were the ethnic group. So it wasn't just the Rohingya, there were other ethnic groups that were being brutalised. Heard about the very brave backpacking teachers that went into the forest to try and ensure there wasn't a cultural genocide. So they were teaching the Quran about their culture. I heard from environmentalists who talked about various energy consortiums, damming, the river systems for profit, and villages being, gone, washed out. I heard from various stakeholders about why these things were, in their view, important for economic reasons. I also went to a museum in northern Thailand, and I got to see photos of the torture. Unfortunately, this is a part that's very hard to see, is when innocent people are being tortured. The prison was called Insane Prison, INSEIN. That left a real impact on me. See, for the majority of people, you're not confronted with this type of brutality. So it's very hard to understand why creating cultures of peace are important when you seem to have all your material needs met for the moment. As has been said in this book that I'm reading, until it's actually coming up, until people actually feel it personally in their own lives, they tend to do nothing because they don't fully appreciate why the human rights of others is important to their lives, why the world is one family, why when we consider, what the needs are of other people's as our own. This is the unity, this is the union that brings people together, is when you are in my interests. What I typically say in my videos is you are me. It means I can stand in your shoes and imagine what it's like. So people get demonized when they stand for peace, or if they stand against what that establishment wants, rather than that establishment hearing this critique and going inside themselves. If they were evolved into a spiritual perspective, they would actually take it on as life has brought them this issue. If they're feeling confronted or stressed by it, they would know they have to go inward and look at what within them is out of alignment with truth. This is a spiritual consciousness. You take responsibility for your pain or your discomfort. You don't then turn around and project it onto other people and say, you are the problem and I'm going to send someone over to fix you up. That is conflict consciousness that has the roots of fear at the very basis of that conflict. But because of the unconsciousness of the person, they haven't self-examined. They've continued on with narratives, believing they have power, believing that they're right, the other's wrong, having others agreeing with them, like a glee club we call it in conflict resolution, where people are supporting that other in a shared narrative which is resistant to anyone speaking the truth to it, because that's seen immediately as a threat. This is how the risk management security apparatus works. It becomes a threat rather than an opportunity. If abundance is what we all really want, this is the best interest scenario that was described in the previous video. Until you lift in consciousness and you start to see that whatever's coming to you is coming through you for your highest good. People see it as a threat because they're at a certain level of consciousness that's in a reactive mode, not a creative mode. When someone challenges you, it's for your highest good. If you feel pain around that, it means something's unhealed within you. You're out of alignment with truth. See, it all depends on the way you choose to see. And what I'm suggesting here is coming from a love-based consciousness, harmony-based consciousness. abundance consciousness, you're going to welcome in different viewpoints, different perspectives. That's how we unify the differences. It all comes on the basis of how we choose to see. For example, in my case, I don't see that everyone's done me wrong because I'm homeless and without income. I am seeing through the prism of this is the experience I've called to myself because I've stood on principle. And this could be seen as a consequence or a cost of standing on principle. But in actual fact, it's giving me a plethora of awareness and knowledge about my society, particularly looking through the eyes of those on low incomes and how they are treated by the whole. It shows me the egalitarianism is not true, and that people are labelled on the basis of money, income, or wealth. And so their treatment, their sense of value, their sense of esteem is lowered, because those who are believing that wealth and status equals higher value, worthiness, success, that's how it plays out. So in actual fact, the experience I'm having is a gift, and everyone becomes my teacher. So I don't sit in resentment of my circumstances. I'm in gratitude because the food is coming to me, not at my request, but life is bringing it to me, and I'm learning through my lived experience that we live in a world of abundance. If I was fighting against my situation and I was blaming the people and sending them emails about how angry I am at how I'm being treated, I'm certainly communicating to them the inequity, but I'm doing it more as a form of sharing my knowledge. That's actually giving. That's different. What I'm saying is if I came at life with this negative energy, I would indeed be living in the poverty, because it's a poverty consciousness then. You can live in abundance and not have many material needs. Look at all the great sages, the mystics, the people within your community who you would say are highly spiritual. They have nothing. They're not seen as poor. They're seen as humble because we label them differently. Interesting, isn't it? I just felt to share that. So what has just been said there is in respect of the military. And the question being posed here is if one has to depend on the world living in strife in order for one to survive. Perhaps this dependence explains why your world resists any attempt to create a structure for lasting peace. As for the second part of your question, wanting to hold on to what you have struggled so long to acquire as an individual or as a nation is not unreasonable if you come from an outside world consciousness. So that is identifying that wealth comes from outside of you. And what I've just gone to explain is that it actually comes from within on the basis of how you choose to see. He says, a what? If you derive your life's great happiness from experiences obtainable only in the outside world, the physical world outside of yourself, you will never want to give up an ounce of all that you've piled up as a person and a nation to make you happy. And as long as those who have not see their unhappiness tied to the lack of material things, they too will get caught in the trap. They will constantly want what you have got, and you will constantly refuse to share it. That is why I said earlier that there is a way to truly eliminate war and all experience of unrest and lack of peace. But this is a spiritual solution. Ultimately, every geopolitical problem, just as every personal problem, breaks down to a spiritual problem. All of life is spiritual, and therefore all of life's problems are spiritually based and spiritually solved. Wars are created on your planet because somebody has something that somebody else wants. This is what causes someone to do something that somebody else does not want them to do. All conflict arises from misplaced desire. It's just a mistake, mistaken belief, all conflict. So rather than perpetuating the conflicts, funding those conflicts, making the other wrong because we're in denial, and this is where we're at sort of thing, we've misplaced the desire. What is it we really desire here? Do we desire to continue a downward spiral where everyone loses? Or do we want or desire a world where everybody wins? This is the win-win that I've talked about in previous videos. It need not be a win-lose. That loss is what perpetuates the insecurity, the grabbing for power. The holding on to power is the belief in that loss. But if in our true nature the world is abundant, then there's no loss. It's in your thinking that the shift has to happen. So the United States, for example, would have really great fear around collapse. It's fighting to keep its position in the world as a great nation because it's hooked its identity to that idea that we're the greatest. The nationalism has been very, very powerful. Yet, since the 80s, in actual fact, it's been carrying a massive deficit. And it's had to go and print money. It's had to find other ways to generate a new boom. The high-tech industry in the United States right now is this attempt to generate a new boom in high-tech through Facebook, through online platforms, through business online. Yet it's a false economy, as I've said before. It's not manufacturing anything. There's no gold backing to the digital data or currency, they call it. It's not real wealth. It's still the same paradigm playing out of loss seeking more, poverty mentality trying to grab onto the next big wave in order to maintain that power and prestige and materialism so that it's not seen as a failure. It does not want to be seen how it has seen others. It sees the world as a dog-eat-dog world of tooth and claw. This is a Hobbesian worldview, not a Lockean worldview of libertarianism, of equality, of rule of law. So when you're coming from a values-free space, that's a conflict consciousness that believes you've got to be top dog. They would see the world like the bully in the playground. You've got to keep on top of the game. You've got to keep them scared so that you can still make money. Power is the end game. Success is piling it all up, having masses and masses of items to prove that you are great. But what I'm saying here is that you're already great, but you don't know it. That greatness is not in all the things that you own. It's in your connection to the greatness within yourself, which comes from generosity. It comes from compassion. It comes from connection with other human beings. It comes from love. That is where we're truly happiest. These things we acquire, we do it as a means of getting love from others. When really, let's go straight to love. Let's forget about the material stuff. And at the same time, just putting it into an even greater perspective, the ecological systems are collapsing because we're so out of balance, so out of harmony with our true nature. That's why these things are collapsing. The scarcity that was projected out is manifesting through ecological collapse because we've taken way too much. And we haven't been able to get off that treadmill because that's the way we do things. The rest of the world's been following suit because it wants to live like the United States. But we'd need another 4 Earths to sustain such greed. This is why I'm doing this video. It's a wake-up call. We have to get real about who we are. These are not just statements of oneness where someone who sees themselves in opposition to this goes, oh no, we don't want everybody becoming empowered because then we lose control. Great that you lose control, then you gain your true power. The very thing you think you're frightened of, like stepping off that cliff into thin air, you think you're going to fall. I'm here to tell you, you're going to fly. Because there was never anything to fear in stepping out of what is known into what is unknown. The unknown is where it gets exciting. Because when you lose all those supports, like I have in my life, and you lose that security and you lose all your money, you start to gain the world. You realize the abundance because you can't make it happen. It has to come to you. When you've gone through depression or trauma or great upheaval emotionally, that phoenix experience is what replaces it. You have to rise because your spirit is so strong. But we fear the collapse because we think we're weak. We're not. We're being reconfigured because we got it wrong. Our collapse had to happen because it was a flimsy structure. It was unstable structure. It's very much what I would depict as like a pack of cards that have no substance to them. You just knock them down because the foundation of that stack was very flimsy. It wasn't grounded in truth. And this is why truth is very powerful. Truth is not a belief. It's a spiritual realization of what is so that is sustainable. That's why peace is our true nature, is the true sustainability on the planet. It's not going to come through recycling. It's not going to come through talking about the environment when we know nothing about the deep interconnections of that environment. We don't even live in nature. Until we live in dwellings that have solar panels, that are very close to the earth, those earth ships would be a very good example. In actual fact, they're made from recycled tyres. In actual fact, the earth ships, you should check them out. They're great. They're round. Imagine living in a round dwelling. Then you have your vegetable garden outside, so you're not going to starve. You might have a shared community garden. You get to know your neighbours. So those needs for company and entertainment, they disappear. You will not be sitting on your iPad. You will not be watching videos when you're living in community because you're going to start to really enjoy the companionship of other human beings, which is what you truly desire. Technology simply became this barrier, another barrier between ourselves. We're seeking to reach each other. Even through conflict, we're seeking to reach each other. It was never about the money. The human experience was never about the money. The money was just a tool. It was part of this learning. Is this who we are? That's why we created the money system. When I became successful, why was it that I no longer felt fulfilled? Because the expansion of who we are never ends. We've misplaced our desires, believing that our happiness and security is in accumulating of all these things to be able to show off to our friends that we've made it. And then to find that we're empty, even though we have everything. Many people suicide who have got it all. And people go, how could they suicide? They had everything. They had a lovely partner, wonderful children. They seemed happy because they neglected their inner work. They misplaced their desires and placed it outside of themselves. They forgot their true wealth, what they need, who they are. What makes their hearts sing? It's amazing. I just have to say, this just came into my mind. It's quite funny. I was amazed at a few lawyers that I came across who actually became clowns. You wouldn't expect that in this conversation, but it just popped into my mind. You know, because I know I was stunned by that. I was like, oh, wow, they became clowns. So they weren't just lawyers, you know, like out to fight the good, well, not always a good fight. It can often be not a good fight. But they made all their money and they said, I'm going to go off and join the circus. It's more fun. I love that. That's an example of it. Or you just give it all away and go and live a simple life and just connect with everyone because we're all equal, is my point. So what greater perspective is saying here, or higher perspective, is that the greatest happiness, we believe, is only obtainable by those outside. That outside world is where it is. That's why we keep looking there. That physical world outside yourself. You've piled up all this stuff to make yourself happy. And then I went on to describe how even those who are in poverty hook their wagons also to the lack of material things. So they're constantly seeing lack in their life. You know, I don't have enough of this. And, you know, I can relate to that. I literally, physically, monetarily do not have enough. I mean, well, I do have enough, but let's just say if I wanted to travel interstate, there's no way I can do it with the money I've got. Doesn't mean I can't do it. It just means there is a perceptual limit monetarily. But my happiness is not coming from material things. It's coming from doing this video, and this is free. This is where my joy is. So I'm placing my desire into this work, which is building peace for the betterment of all of humanity. The material things drop away as a result of that because my focus, I've placed my desire on what I love. It's not misplaced. I have all my basic needs met. I don't pay rent. I don't have an income. I don't pay tax. Well, I do through GST, let's say. But there's a happiness and a joy in this, so I'm feeling abundant. I'm starting to understand that who I am is not about what I have. It's about integrity. It's about following my own path. That's the spiritual solution that I implement in my own life, is to stay true to my values. No matter what happens, to speak my truth, even in light of the fact that those watching this video may not like that truth. I'm not here to please people. I'm here to be who I am as an example of what's possible. Now, that can be either taken as a gift given, or someone in a consciousness of fear can see it as a threat. They don't want liberty. It's got sort of freedom, liberty, and happiness. Life, liberty, and happiness is the US philosophy. Life, liberty, and happiness. And that's what I'm living. This is for you. So the problems have to be spiritually solved. The wars have come about through somebody wanting something that someone else has got. And that's what causes someone to do something that somebody else does not want them to do because of this misplaced desire. Again, all conflict arises from misplaced desire, was the purpose of my narrative that I've just given you. The only peace in all the world that is sustaining is internal peace. Let each person find peace within. When you find peace within, you also find that you cannot do without. And that's what I've explained, is that things have come to me when I haven't panicked about not having money. One of my rules is I don't ask. So it has to come to me. This means simply that you no longer need the things of your outside world. Not needing is a great freedom. Another wise teacher states, need nothing. Just be. This is the beingness I've talked about before. Need has inherent within it fear. I need to have this. I need to have that. I can't do without my iPhone. I need my job. What am I going to do? Well, you're going to sit back, what I call reclining into Buddha, and let life guide you. You're going to let go of control. So the control is not in the apparatus even of security, interestingly enough. The control is inherent within the people who are afraid of losing control. And so the world mirrors it out. Interesting, isn't it? Not needing is a great freedom. So those advocating for freedom, need nothing and you'll have it. You can't fight for freedom. Democracy is not the freedom everyone in the world needs. Not needing is the true freedom. That's why I've often referred to Byron Katie, who does the work. That's all about questioning beliefs and letting go. It actually undoes the conflict too from within, is what her work is. Her work's very powerful. Thework.com, I highly recommend. So it frees you first from fear. This is the big one. Fear that there is something you won't have. Fear that there is something you have that you will lose. This is the roots of it. And fear that without a certain thing, you won't be happy. What we're really fighting is the feeling of emptiness, of not enough, of powerlessness is what we're fighting. That's why we have security surveillance. That's why we have well-paying jobs. That's why we find a partner. Because you fear the loss. You fear being alone, you won't be loved, that you're not worthy, that you're a failure. We fear failure. Byron Katie would say, welcome it. That's how you lose your fear of it. I look forward to failing, would be what she would say. I look forward to losing everything, if that's your great fear. I look forward to being alone. And I do. I actually enjoy being alone. Goes on to say, when you have nothing to fear, you have nothing over which to be angry. There goes the anger. That's why I say anger is a call for help. It's really about fear, is anger. Just that in the case of males, that they don't feel they can express their fear in ways like crying or anything like that, so they get angry instead because that's acceptable. That's why they do it. It's not necessarily what they would do naturally if they were allowed to be men and just be human. You are not angry when you don't get what you want because your wanting it was simply a preference, not a necessity. You therefore have no fear associated with the possibility of not getting it, hence no anger. I might give an example of that. Throughout my entire life, I've tried very hard. Like when I started my business, Worldpeacefull, I put out lots of proposals. I did a lot of work for free on those proposals, like a really great strategy. I don't know how. I've had books filled with contacts that I've contacted to try and get things going. I remember writing to 200 schools to get real hope in the schools. I didn't get one response. I never gave up. I always tried. I mean, this last few years I've been diverted down different trajectories, and that was more to do with injustice, but that's another matter. But let's just say that what that's done for me is it's enabled me to live A, with uncertainty, B, with failure. Didn't work. These things didn't work. And I suppose I did feel I did try to go face to face with people, but it wasn't always easy. I found different ways of thinking because I've changed too myself. Like I've become more in alignment with spiritual values now. It's tending to put me in a position where I'm not really in full compatibility, if you like, with the business ethos anymore. So as a result of that, these things have not come together. Now, I could look at it as failure, but what I really know in truth is that I was not meant to. I was meant to go through the experience of these things. And I've had a life full of experience, which was definitely chosen. It hasn't limited me in the sense that I've travelled the world and travelled Australia and travelled to Nepal and, lots of fun things I've done. I've been a clown and many wonderful things happened as well. But if we're talking about a business success story, no, definitely not. Although if success was in the trying, I would say I've been highly successful. I have an incredible resilience and I'm very optimistic. I keep trying. I never give up. I never give up. And it's just because I see possibilities and I go for it. So maybe that's the real world in the sense that it's not all going to come to you or beat a path to your door. You are going to actually go through a lot of challenges. Now, I could, maybe moments I've had anger, but for the most part, I'm not angry. I just see it is what it is. That's accepting life as it is. And that's a peace perspective. Can't make people take up your program. They've got to choose it. And if they're not choosing it, that's not meant to be. You're meant to just go through the experience of trying. And that's a good thing. So it says here, you are not angry when you don't get what you want because blah, blah, the wanting is really a preference. You therefore have no fear associated with the possibility of not getting it. True. You are not angry when you see others doing what you don't want them to do because you don't need them to do or not do any particular thing, hence no anger. I'm still working on that because there are times when I think something is inappropriate and I might say something, so I'm still learning. So I'm going to read you more of this. This can be confronting, definitely, because people will go, oh, no, that's not right. What I would ask you to do is just simply listen to what I'm saying, because I also felt like you do. But just listen to it, because this is coming from a higher perspective. As we grow in knowledge, we'll come into a really deep understanding of what this really means. But at the moment, we're all still evolving. You are not angry when someone is unkind because you have no need for them to be kind. You have no anger when someone is unloving because you have no need for them to love you. You have no anger when someone is cruel or hurtful or seeking to damage you, for you have no need for them to behave in any other way. And you are clear that you cannot be damaged. You do not even have anger should someone seek to take your life, because you do not fear death. When fear is taken from you, all else can be taken from you and you will not be angry. Imagine that. Imagine, and I'll give you some examples. I'll actually give you an example. Byron Katie. She went through depression. Apparently she was a pretty cantankerous person, very negative. She's working as a real estate agent. This is in the United States. She came from a small town called Needles. Anyway, she said she used to sleep on the floor. Now, this is a wealthy woman. She was wealthy. She had everything, but was depressed because she had issues from her childhood. Deeply depressed. She was so depressed that she would sleep on the floor. Not worthy of a bed was what she thought. She said one morning a cockroach ran over her leg and she woke up. Now, the way she describes it, you have to listen to her story, 1,000 Names for Joy. It's an audio book, highly recommended, if you want to know what the higher perspective feels like. She said her words were, it woke up inside me. So a consciousness woke up inside her. Her life as Byron Katie, or as Katie, was gone. Looked into the mirror, was in a state of love. Looked around and saw no separation. Everything was one. Very excited. Everyone that knew her were shocked at the change in her because she had no fear whatsoever. She said she would sit on a sort of a, what was it? Trying to think of the word. I'm not usually lost for words, as you might note. Sort of a bench or something she was sitting on. I know that's the wrong word. But she said she cried and cried and cried, joy, tears of joy. She said it would just pour out of her. The work that I've talked about, which is 5 questions, was born inside her, she said. Just very briefly, the first question is it true? Second question is, can you be absolutely sure that it's true? Third question is, how do you feel? How do you react when you believe the thought? Fourth question is, who would you be without the thought, looking at the situation? And then what she calls the turnarounds. So if you think you're a failure, the turnaround would be, I'm not a failure. Maybe I was failed. I don't know if that could be an appropriate turnaround. And you try on the opposite, because peace is found in the truth of who you are. And when we project negatively, it literally is a projection. The reason she gets them to turn it around is to experience the reverse of that thought, which, if you're being negative, is obviously the positive. And then you'd find 3 reasons why that's true. Before I mentioned that, she would also say you're frightened of a failure, I welcome I am happy to become a failure. I look forward, this is her words, I look forward to being a failure. That's courage. You face what you fear. Courage is not destroying what you fear. That's fear that's taken over you, and you are believing that that's an enemy to justify an act that works against who you are. PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, has come about in soldiers because they're actually operating outside of who they are. So this is not whimsical, this is fact. This is why they're bringing drones in, so they're removing a human element, which is not good for people, because those on the ground are going to be taken out, because someone in a remote situation is going to say, oh, that person's got to go. They're rocking the apple cart. We want total control. That's fear still in a belief system of control. So the problem's never changed. It's just morphed into something else, because the problem's never been resolved, because the person's not seeking to resolve it, they're seeking power, believing that power is what they need. That's the misplaced desire. Their true power lies within them. Their true happiness is there. Otherwise, they end up on a destructive cycle that never ends. This is your endless war, in truth. Until we get to a point where we say, I don't want any more war. It's actually not serving me. When I don't seek out the best interests of others, my own interests are not served. This is the reality around that. What you do to another returns to the self. It's cyclical. It's not just removing something, you're sending out something that's going to come back, because life energy is circular. That's why I'm saying these things. So, peace, going back to inner peace. You do not even have anger should someone seek to take your life. Now, that's why I brought in Byron Katie. Someone came up to her and put a gun at, it was actually a gang member who put a gun at her waist and said, I have to kill you. That's what he said. Now, because she's in a state of awakened wonder, where she is one with all of it, she describes when that happened, saying to him, don't do it, not to save her life, but to actually, because she was concerned about him. She knew if he killed her, he would carry the guilt for the rest of his life, because he's living in a separated state of consciousness. She was not in the slightest bit fearful of being killed, because she knows there's no death. In fact, what she said was she looked at the clouds, didn't want to miss a minute of this life. She's living fully in the moment. People go, how crazy is that? No, this is the experience of that high perspective. When you're awake, you have no fear. And so she's looking around and she's wondering, is this how the story ends? She tells herself. But she does not miss 1 minute of her life for fear of her death, because there's no fear there. So she said she just waited. He obviously felt that, because she's very different. She's not screaming and begging for her life. Apparently he uncocks the gun and he just walked away. I'll give you another example of an awakened person. Peace Pilgrim, she's another one to look up. She was another one who awakened. She went through ups and downs and ups and downs and ups and downs until she finally overcame her fear and harmonized, if you like, with the life pattern. She went across the United States 7 times, as far as I recall, by herself, had no money, speaking about peace to everybody. She was around 50 to 70 years old. 20-year period she walked across the United States. In the snow, blizzards, cold, heat. She slept on the ground. She said she could command her body to just lie on the ground. Now, all of us would go, oh, God, I wish I could do that. I would be not sleeping. I'm not at that level. But what did she say? Love over hate. What was it? Love over hate. Or love over fear. Can't quite remember the words she used. She had a mantra that she used. Peace, truth over falsehood. Truth over falsehood. I think peace over fear, or love over hate, something like that. I can't quite remember. I'd have to look back at her work. But when she was walking, that was a mantra going on in her mind that repeated and repeated and repeated. Truth over falsehood. Love over fear. Peace over hatred, or something like that. It was really profound. And she said that she saw a man chase a child into a barn. I've talked about this story before. Man was going to sexually molest the child. And she just stood between the man and the child, and she stared at him with unconditional love. That's your God consciousness, if you like, or your higher perspective. He stared very hard at her. He obviously felt something. And after a while, he walked away, just as the guy with the gun did with Byron Katie. So we're talking about love as the power here. This is not a motherhood statement, although I'm all for motherhood. I don't particularly like that term. This is the power of motherhood, which includes everyone as their family. So when love is brought into a space like this, where someone is violent, it disarms them. Because that is what they truly connect to. I was going to say the word need, but I knew it was wrong to say the word need, because need has fear inherent in it. It's more accurate to say that love is who they are. So when that one was looking at that other with love, the mirror of that was he felt love in himself, and that's what protected the child. That is why it is not whimsical to talk about love each other. All the religions have talked about it because it's true. Love is the greatest security. When we keep creating more and more things in response to conflict consciousness, fear-based consciousness, We're believing we're protected, but we're actually creating more recognition of what we fear. The war on terror is all about focusing on that fearful other that we have to defend and protect ourselves from. Rather than looking around the whole world that's peaceful and that people are very willing to help one another, and that these militias, these violent groups, whether they be one, a few, a network, or a military organised army, they're all coming from the same consciousness of fear and believing that if they're violent, they're safe. Although those who are the subject of that violence, who are these days 90% are innocent civilians, they're not safe because of their unchecked fear. What would love of the people do? It would drastically reduce military spending when you love the people. Those who, again, are identifying with the loss of profit, which is a false profit, may resist, may demonise that party advocating for that reduction at their own expense, because they're maintaining a system of violence that's causing great harm to others, when their energies and talents could be redeployed in areas that serves humanity. It was Jim Shannon who, in that movie, The New Earth Army, that was Men That Stare at Goats, very, very famous American movie. Jim Shannon was the guy who headed that unit, where they were doing juicing, they were practicing New Age type modalities, they were doing remote viewing, psychic spies they were called. And Jim Shannon, he had a website. He only died a few years ago. And what he was envisaging, because he was creating through visual art, because that envisaging is what actually manifests what will come. He was envisaging all the armies being used and deployed in sustaining the planet. So a reduction in military spending would not necessarily mean the ending of the military. It would mean the redeploying of the military into sustaining the planet, which would give them far greater satisfaction than going and killing women and children in Syria or in Afghanistan or Iraq, and then dealing with the PTSD, because it's the soldiers that suffer on the ground. The leaders aren't there. They're remotely, organising and instructing those generals. The generals go, they go and visit, but they don't necessarily go into those combat situations anymore. So wouldn't it be a far, far greater thing to send them into reforesting, using their engineering to create zero-point energy systems, which they know how to do, deploying them to rehouse all the refugees, redeploying them to assist in creating permaculture gardens in Africa so that the poor can eat, redeploying some of the scientists within the military to tackle the diseases that are on the planet that are actually growing through the medicines, inoculations that are happening. Redeploying those skills and talents of those men in ways that are going to produce the highest good for humanity at this time when things are all falling apart. To increase militarism through fear of societal breakdown is not going to produce peace in the world. It's again the same fear manifesting in another way of I need to defend myself, rather than, including the people in solving the problem together. That's what love does. So I just felt to share that as it came to me. I'll read on a bit. You know inwardly, intuitively, that everything you've created can be created again, or more importantly, that it doesn't matter. So in other words, you're a creative being. It's not a loss here. It's a misplaced desire if you think loss is happening. It's not. When you find inner peace, neither the presence nor the absence of any person, place or thing, condition, circumstance or situation can be the creator of your state of mind or the cause of your experience of being. So you won't blame others for why you're unhappy. You will just deal with that. If you're in inner peace, you won't even feel unhappy. This does not mean that you reject all things of the body, far from it. You experience being fully in your body and the delights of that as you never have before. Yet your involvement with things of the body will be voluntary, not mandatory. You will experience bodily sensations because you choose to, not because you are required to in order to feel happy or to justify sadness. Now that could be alluding to alcohol, drinking or sex, addictions, because you want to feel good for a little while. Or because you've been required to, it says here. This one simple change, seeking and finding peace within, could, were it undertaken by everyone, end all wars, eliminate conflict, prevent injustice, and bring the world to everlasting peace. There is no other formula necessary or possible. World peace is a personal thing. So I can't go charging out there and say, look, world peace, world peace. I have to be the peace that I'm promoting. And it's not even promoting it. You just live by example. That's why when I produce these videos, I'm not going out there crazy on Facebook and posting it everywhere, because I'm not looking for popularity. I do these videos because I feel inspired to do it. And I post where I post because I feel inspired to. And I know that that audience I have, even as small as 10 or 12, are the ones I wish to speak with. There's no mistake you've come to me. No mistake whatsoever. So I know it's not a popularity contest. It's not about winning the hearts and the minds of the millions. It's about talking to those who feel drawn to me because you have called me to you. That is how that higher perspective is. And you can say, no, we're watching her, or for some of you, or others who just happen to cross my lovely video. No mistakes. So it says lastly here, what is needed is not a change of circumstances, but a change of consciousness. That is the key. So on that note, I'm going to leave it there. And of course, I send you love and peace through everything that I'm doing. And I hope I was able to articulate that there's no loss here. There's no loss in power, nothing. This is a potential. And I got that from the electronic circuit board that I explained in my other video. There is a potential here that you're losing because you are staying in states of fear. You cannot control the uncontrollable. Life is not, it's not possible to control life. You are not the creator of it. It created you. This high perspective understands all of it. That's your mass surveillance, but this is a surveillance through love. It has only preferences. There's no judgment in it. All is free to choose, which is the highest love. So the information that I've shared with you from this higher perspective is for you. And the words, your happy destiny is unavoidable, is what I want to leave you with. Perhaps that's the cosmic joke. Anyway, lots of love, and thank you for watching and listening. I send you enormous love. Bye.